Ferran, ¿me das un poquito de luz de sala, por favor? Sí, por favor. Perdón. Buen día, bienvenidos a las jornadas profesionales. Un segundo. Are you okay with the lights? Ok. Buen día, bienvenidos a las jornadas profesionales de la alternativa. Esta es nuestra 12ª edición de jornadas. Quiero agradecer primero de todo a ACE, Acción Cultural, y al SDE, del Departamento de Cultura, l'ICEC, que hacen posible esto, tener a estos panelistas tan increíbles. Brian Konevsky, Camila Cook, Antoni Pinent, Mira Estaleva. Los va a presentar Antoni Pinent, que es cineasta y curador de arte. Sabe de todo, es cine experimental. El año pasado tuvimos la suerte de hacer un monográfico, la mala suerte de que fuese online, pero así nos conocimos y va a ser el moderador. Muchísimas gracias por venir hasta aquí. Vienen de lejos. Os dejo. Muchas gracias. Gracias por venir.
Thanks so much, Patricia. So we start? The title of this panel, the Friday 19th, the title is Funding Experimental Filmmaking, with the subtitle The Huge Challenge of Making Non-Commercial Films. So the format will be, I will read the biographies. The order will be Brian, the first one, the second Mira, and afterwards it will be Camila, the third. And afterwards, after the first round, it will be open to the audience if you want to start to do some questions or whatever. So we will do this format. So I will try, okay, I will start with Brian Konevsky. He's a cultural worker who works as a moving image artist, teacher, lecturer, and film festival director. He has taught at the University of New Mexico. He was last year retired after 25 years teaching there. Also at the University of California and Downhook in South Korea. And he was the founder and artistic director who runs the Experiments in Cinema in Albuquerque, New Mexico. It's an annual international film festival that showcases cinematic experimentation from around the world. Even we have to say there's a no competitive festival. This is important for this panel, I think. And he's the president as well of the Basement Films, one of the few remaining first-generation micro-cinemas in the United States, in addition to sitting on the board of advisors for the Ann Arbor Film Festival, for example, and many others. So thanks so much to be here. If you want to start, Brian.
Okay. Check. Thanks everybody for coming. This is, and thanks for your introduction, Antoni. Actually, two of our panelists, Antoni and Camila, have been to my festival. We've invited them, and Antoni did a wonderful workshop, and Camila was one of our resident artists, and we'll talk about the residency in a bit. For today's panel, I'll be speaking from the perspective of, for the most part, a film festival organizer, director, and the fundraising, the grant writing, and such that we have done to build our event. And even though the panel is more specifically about fundraising for creative projects for artists, for individuals, I think that this perspective will be relevant, and I think it does intersect in some interesting ways.
Well, the second one is Mira Estaleva, is from Bulgaria, has been actively involved in festival and market management and programming production, consulting, distribution, and exhibition for over 25 years. After studying theology and psychology, She joined the team of Sofia International Film Festival at the very start. She's currently managing director of Sofia International Film Festival, the section of Art Fest, and programmer and head of the festival's co-production Market Sofia Meetings, as well as a producer and distributor. She's also a member of the European Film Academy and sits on the board of the European Parliament Lux Prize, Cine Europa. So welcome.
Hello, good morning. Thank you, Antoni, for the introduction. Thank you, everybody, for joining here, because I can see it as a very fruitful discussion about alternative financing, because every time when we are talking non-commercial, it's always about alternative financing and being creative, not only in what we are doing, but the way we are financing it and the way we are distributing it, trying to outreach the audiences out there. But yeah, keep the patience, keep tuned.
Thanks so much, Mira. And the last position is Kamila Kok. Is from Poland, if I'm right. Is a multimedia artist and writer whose hybrid works explore and transformative potential of apparatuses, dreams and memories in the creation of societal myths and narratives. Of particular interest to her practice are stories that subvert dominant narrative of history, especially those relating to post-Soviet identities. In her recent projects, she has employed diverse archival sources in conjunction with all tools to examine notions of agency, belonging, and identity, while attempting to trace out complex lineage of meaning and representation. So welcome.
Thank you, Antoni. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you to L'Alternativa for your wonderfully generous invitation and to be able to meet new people, but also reconnect with old friends. As you all know, artists or experimental film world is quite a small world, that's a good and a bad thing, as with everything. But I think today what I will try and contribute to is speak from my own experience as an experimental filmmaker who has existed on the fringes of film industry for quite some time. And probably I'll talk most relevantly about my journey from making shorter films to making features.
And so I thought we would begin the panel today with a short video by Wego Kreider that speaks sort of humorously about the whole process of funding and having your work accepted into festivals and such. Wego had been actually our first resident artist at Experiments in Cinema. And again, we'll talk about the residency in a short bit, but perhaps we could begin with the video?
I regret to inform you, we cannot accept your submission. Our committee loved your proposal, but you won't be in our exhibition. Thank you for your contribution. We wish you a great day. Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you. We wish you a great day. We appreciate the opportunity to view your artwork, oh so clever. We wish you continued success in all of your creative endeavors. Thank you for your contribution. We wish you a great day. Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you. We wish you a great day. Our decision was based on many factors separate from the worth of your proposition. Your project just doesn't have enough interest to captivate a modern art theoretician. Thank you for your contribution. We wish you a great day. Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you. We wish you a great day. All projects chosen for commission will be announced this coming year. We hope you will consider reapplying during our next grant cycle, so please volunteer. Thank you for your contribution. We wish you a great day. Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you. We wish you a great day.
So how many of you have gotten such letters, rejection letters?
Nice, I think it's an excellent choice. Maybe too many people of the audience maybe will be identified, no, with this not submission or rejection of your film, but it's to continue, no? It's don't stop. You can go again. Okay, so they asked me to do an informal roundtable, so it's not they're not preparing panels discussion here or the speeching before to start with the topics, because there are many ways to enter to talk about these financial non-commercial films. It will be one of them is fundraising or residencies, for example, but mostly in our case, for example, I think we can talk about the different context geography. For example, in our case, it's always, when you are talking about experimental cinema, it's always from our packets. So it's an investment. And if you don't receive an award or whatever in the festival, there's not income afterwards. So here there are two artists, even you are an artist, but you are running a festival. So maybe we're going to start a little bit. What is the decision to do a non-competitive festival when you know that the artist needs sometimes this money to continue to produce artworks?
The beginning again, that you said?
In your festival is not competitive. The reason. You can explain the reason of the...
And actually, maybe this speaks to Wago's piece just a little bit. I built my festival on the good, the bad, and the ugly of participating and attending so many festivals around the world. And I hope I've succeeded in that. We'll see. But one of the things that we thought was very interesting was to create a non-competitive event. In other words, it seems to me, anyway, that there's already, just being adjudicated into a festival is kind of competitive enough, in my mind, for our event. And this does not speak to other events that are competitive. They have their own ways of going about doing things. But we thought that, again, just being adjudicated in was competitive enough. And beyond that, things get so subjective that we just wanted to move away from it. And at our event, or what I experienced at so many competitive festivals, was that all of us here at this event, rather than coming together as a community, or perhaps a micro-community, that it pitted artists against each other. And there wasn't so much a sense of camaraderie, but a sense of competitiveness that sort of detracted from the conversations, the sense of coming together and such. And so for those reasons, we really support and really embrace the notion of non-competitiveness. We want people to come to our festival to enjoy, to have conversations, and most importantly, to share their films, to share their ideas, and such. Maybe in the same way that we're sharing our experiences today. And I should say also that I'm coming from the perspective of the United States, which is in a mess right now, but the United States, which is a country that per capita spends about a fraction of a penny per person on cultural activities. We spend dollars, multiple dollars per capita on the military-industrial complex. In other words, our country is very good at killing people, but we don't give a rat's ass about being creative. And here I'm thinking about a friend of mine, she passed away a few years ago, Sherry Rabinowitz, who said that artists need to create on the same scale that society has the capacity to destroy. I just wanted to sort of throw that out there. It's not specifically how to raise money for your film, but it gives you a sense of where I'm coming from, my background, and what I'm up against, in a sense.
Thanks so much. No, I ask directly the first question because I always thinking about this chain. So you are doing your film, you want to go to the windows to show the audience, no? to connect to the people. And the unique way, if you are not showing the film at the distribution center afterwards or at the museums or the TV channels or whatever, broadcast, the unique way is to get an award. So sometimes economical award, because it's a mention, it doesn't matter because there is no money behind. Right. So this was the first question I wanted to do it as running a festival. So what about the opinion about these non-competitive festivals or competitive about to get some incomes afterwards, investment?
Right. Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think that's one of the reasons why festivals there are competitive festivals out there for that reason. So I'll just maybe give you an example from my personal experience, which is I feel most comfortable speaking about that, was that 3 years ago I made a short film that was 4 minutes long. It was made on my mobile phone using some strange extension lenses. It was made for an online platform for BIM, actually, in Argentina, which is the Biennale of the Moving Image that I think the three of us have been to. And it's a film that I had absolutely no intention of sending to festivals. I thought it would exist on a platform. And I think a couple of festivals got in touch with me and they said, can we show this film? It's about COVID. And since the film has traveled to over 60 festivals, had won awards, and it was just completely unexpected. But that first award actually led to the film being shown in other places. Now, recently I have made a feature film, which had premiered at the London Film Festival, and that's it. And I have no idea where else it's going right now. And that took 5 years of work and $40,000. So this is, the serendipity of the experience of an experimental artist filmmaker. It's, the scale is quite large. But I think, I should also say that I am a Polish citizen, but I have been residing in the UK for the last 20 years. So my existence as a filmmaker is very much in the realm of, that's quite specific to the UK, which is that of an artist filmmaker. Mm-hmm. And we are lucky to have some state funding that's particularly targeted at people as myself, such as myself, who might make feature films, but they are feature films that don't make money. Because I think this is what we're talking about. We're talking about also, and I think, Mira, you have a slightly different perspective on that, but we're dealing with films that take a long time to make, a lot of favors, a lot of good friends, but actually they will never make any money. Mm. And I think there's something interesting about the stakes being quite low in that respect, because I suppose that helps our community a little bit, because we know from the start that we're not going to be selling that film, right? But at the same time, and I find myself in this boat, you're on a journey, and I have actually made a jump somehow more towards commercial filmmaking, but I'm kind of in between that space, which is also quite difficult to occupy, because I'm neither here nor there. So in the UK, for example, I qualify for the Arts Council money, which is the funding body that's been funding me, but I also want to start approaching what's called the British Film Institute Film Fund. But for that, the route is very, very different because it requires perfect scripts and it requires a producer that comes on board. So that process is very, very different. So I think that's where I come from right now. Maybe we can, kind of revert back to the residency after, but yeah.
We have to say that the structure of production in both cases is so different than commercial films and the non-commercial, because if you have the lucky to win a prize, an award, it's for you. There is not a production behind you, for example. This is the reason. Even if when you get money from the governments or whatever, they know very well that there's not incomes afterwards. It's to do the project and that's it, and to show at the maximum possible in different windows and festivals worldwide, and that's it. We'll return afterwards. So in your case, Mira?
I take on this.
About the non-commercial, non-competitive festival and these kind of places, if you are agreeing.
I would start with this. That festivals are a great place. Basically, in the film world, being it more traditional or more experimental, this is the only place for most of the filmmakers to expose. But here I will open kind of the discussion for be more creative, don't wait only for the festivals. You make it happen because you make the name for yourself. How many festivals are happening? Of course, there are many festivals in the world, and thanks God, because when they are established, and they're kind of positioning you in between the professional world. But beside that, you can always make it for yourself, kind of talk to the cinema directly, connect with other filmmakers like you, make a program, make it an event, make it a flash mob, go to transmedia, use all the possibilities that technology is offering nowadays, just because you need that. You need that for the audience to recognize you. If the audience recognizes you, the funders will recognize you also, because next time you will go and will show in your portfolio, I have this festival, I have this event. You might have been behind the events you're doing, but it means that you will attract audience. In this audience, you will attract most probably people that think look alike. Audience doesn't know everything which is happening. Actually, audience depends on the film festival and the curators of the film festivals. The VOD platforms, I'm not defending too much here, because in the VOD platforms, the small things are just sinking. If as an audience, I don't know about this artist or this film, I don't have a single chance to find it on the platforms. So we are always talking about the name of the artists, and that's why I'm just kind of really, really encouraging you. Be more creative when you are thinking of exposing your works. Do not wait only for the festivals. Do not. It's kind of, I think this time has gone. You have to be proactive. And here I wanted to say, yes, talking about crowdfunding. Yesterday we talked with Camilla. Of course, there are many public funds in Europe. I'm sure that in Catalonia and in Spain in general, there is a good system of supporting arts, maybe not much money. That's why I think that crowdfunding is not only instrument to find money for your project, to engage audience, because there are many platforms, maybe there are even kind of some Spanish platforms that I haven't heard. The big ones, Indiegogo and Kickstarters, and there are plenty of them. So basically engage audience which are willing to give small amounts for your work. But, and then you kind of can get some, you can get, I don't know, 1,000, 10,000, 20,000, it depends on what you need. You have to explain it, you have to kind of be seductive to the audience, to this audience that will come and check online to give you money. But then always think about crowdfunding as an instrument of distribution, because once you manage to attract some people's attention and they give you €1 or 5 or 10 or 20 or 50, doesn't make difference, they will come to see your work. They will come to see your work, they will bring the friends, they will bring the family, they will bring the neighbors. So this is kind of how small communities are built, and non-commercial films in every aspect needs community. It's a language that's why we are talking all the time. It's not mainstream, it's not commercial. What does it mean? Being experimental on only art house films, they're not commercial, they do not make money. And why I'm talking that you have to be proactive and creative, because this is the amount of the films which are produced everywhere, I mean not only in Europe, and this amount of films which are being exposed. It's like that. Check the statistics. I mean, I don't remember them. I have visual memory. It's like I see the mountains, and it's so. It has been always like that, but nowadays the interest to the non-commercial film is a bit less. I think it's temporarily anyway, because it really depends on the marketing tools that we are using. Somehow, don't underestimate that, and always consider that you as an artist are the one that has to start the process to expose yourself, because there are not so many specialists in PR and marketing, and we never have money to pay them. But with small things, you can achieve a lot. It's about really how to process it, how to start thinking about. You can make an event with sponsor wine or something like that, and to make it into a dancing or something which would be much more interactive and interesting for the audience, and they will come and will have the whole experience, and they will be able to communicate with other people. And here comes, you can find the sponsors, because the sponsors also, I mean small sponsors, but somebody can come with a catering, with drinks, with presents for the audience, small things like that. But don't be shy to think in this direction.
I would like to introduce maybe other details. For example, I agree with your statement, but I have to say that I think always that the experimental community is so small. So who is the audience for the experimental films? Is the same community? They are filmmakers. They are going to the festivals to see the movie. So there's only two ways to receive money. It's one of the governments, if you have the lucky to get these supports, the fellowships or whatever, or the other way is to self-production. So if you want to live doing experimental cinema, you have to do other works, other jobs, as a teacher, doing workshops, running, or maybe as a, I don't know, waiter or another out of the artist scene. So it's very hard about this. And I want to introduce another, because there's a paradox as well. Sometimes you are talking about to get sponsors for wine and other kind of things out of the art scene, maybe, or the luxury stuff and brands and so on. But sometimes, my colleagues, they say to me, but okay, they don't want to apply some fellowships to banks, for example, BBVA or other in our place in geographies, because they don't want to put the logo from the sponsors. So this contradiction, because it's so wild, this freedom to do the experimental cinema, that is a contradiction to put the logos from the other places they put the money. So, always this against.
Okay, I got your point, but let me answer first the first comment. The audience of experimental film, if we want to keep it only professional, do you want that? I don't want. I mean, art is for everybody, but that's why I'm saying it's responsibility of the artist also, because otherwise we have to wait only to the festivals. And festivals are limited in their resources and capacity, and they're happening once a year. And that's why I'm saying kind of to be much proactive in getting your audience and not to keep it only between the professional filmmakers. And that's why I'm kind of encouraging to think more creatively, to make it as an event which will attract some other people. They might not be particularly interested in experimental films, for example, but they will say, oh, wow, I will meet, there will be dancing after, there will be exhibition, if you combine with other artists. So kind of at the end, you offer much more than only your film, and what is the bonus for the audience? They will get much more. They will get the whole experience, and this way you are enlarging your audience.
Can I add something? And also, in the UK, we call it hybrid distribution, right? So and the idea is that, but of course, that there's also problematics to that, because you do ideally want your film to go through a festival run, because if you show it anywhere else in public, then you're depriving yourself of the premiere at Rotterdam or Berlinale or any other place like that, right? So the premieres are important for those of you who want to send to those festivals. But hybrid distribution, I think, links to also crowdsourcing in as far as building your audiences. I think it's a fantastic model, and I completely agree with you. I think with the rise of internet platforms and all of the other factors such as COVID too, I think we have entered an era of artists being us as artists being our own producers, right? And it's a hat that I think Anna and I talked about it yesterday, Dan and I talked about it yesterday, that, as artists, we often think like, oh God, I don't want to be in this messy business of raising money, or like, I really want a producer because I don't want to do this work. But actually, it is you as an artist who knows your audiences best, because you know the themes of your film. What is the theme of your film? You know who to reach out to. And actually, it's through you that probably those communities can be best reached. So I agree with you about doing all this work as an artist, that I think, in some ways you owe it to the work. But then, the different community centers, I think I was saying to Danny yesterday that one of the ways of attracting audiences to your film is doing all sorts of different activities, hence the hybrid, right? So you do maybe a screening at the community center, you do a symposium, that you attract, experts on a subject who also have their own audiences, they have their own following, and indeed you're expanding the audience beyond the very small circle of experimental filmmakers. And I think that also brings strength to your work. It brings much more interesting discussions, I think. And I think it helps you to prepare ground for the next work, because I think people, if they like your project already, then they're already curious as to what you're going to do next.
It's true.
If I could. Your comment about being as creative, perhaps in your work itself, in your film, as you are in fundraising, I think is a really, really interesting point. And I wanted to maybe explore that just a little bit. So there's kind of two avenues there. There's one, how can you be more creative in your own production? How can you be more creative in fundraising? In terms of fundraising, I love that idea of, for me, perhaps beginning with crowdfunding, because you don't have to worry about institutional support. It's you. And I'm thinking about my festival, where, as an example, I would, when I began the event, well, let's put it this way. Nobody wants to be the first person to recognize the value of your work. And I mean that in terms of, say, in the United States, the National Endowment for the Arts, for example. They're not going to be interested in you if you have not received any support from any other funding organizations. So you have to be really inventive and really creative when you're at, I hate to put it this way, but at the bottom, at the beginning of your career. And slowly build your way up. In other words, for me, we began with some local organizations that did fund the festival in some very small ways. And from local funding, we went to regional funding. From regional funding to national funding. So these days, we are getting support from the National Endowment for the Arts. We are getting support from the National Endowment for the Humanities. We've received support from the Trust for Mutual Understanding, and all of that is wonderful, but it's been small, if you know the expression, baby steps.
I also say you did receive some funding from the Arts Council England.
And we've received funding from the Arts Council of England as well.
Well, sorry, this is just a small point I wanted to say. That's another way of thinking about raising funds through, collaborating with festivals. Is that, so I did the residency at Brian's Festival, and the residency, this is a different way of thinking about funding as well, that it isn't just somebody coming in with a, envelope of cash. Is a different, is somebody offering you a residency, in which case it was a very, in Brian's case, it's a very generous residency when an artist spends a month, they get a place to live, they get a studio, and you have to cover your own maintenance expenses, in which case I did apply to the Arts Council of England for a grant, and it was a film I made in Brian's archives that had a budget of £5,000, which actually it was an okay budget for the film, it was. But the idea there is that then Brian is able to put a logo of the Arts Council of England on his festival catalogue, in his festival catalogue, and then that generates more funding. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
No, that's a really good point. And then the second point that I wanted to make, I don't mean to dominate this, is being inventive and creative with your work. And I think you had commented about, you made a comment about, you know, how much money do you need to make your film? How much money do you need? And I would argue, well, also as a teacher, I would often say to my students, there was an exercise I would do. So you're all my students, and one by one, what's the project that you want to work on? If you had unlimited resources, what would you need? A helicopter shot, a crowd of 1,000 people in, you know, in the background as background actors, et cetera, et cetera. Just imagine if money was not an object. And we go around the room and they would do this. I'd say, okay, now you're going to make that same film with absolutely none of those resources. How are you going to do it? In other words, when you think that you might need so much money, when you think that you might need this, that, or the other to make your film, do you really? How can you make that film without that budget? And that might be a way of beginning in those baby steps, as I mentioned earlier, to build your way up to perhaps something a little bit more adventurous, something a little bit more, what's the word? Anyway, yes, you get the idea.
Absolutely. I mean, especially if you're new to the stage, if you're making your name, definitely you have to start with something small and engage all your friends. Not every time, but at least in the beginning, because again, you have to show what you can. So you get all the armies, family, friends, and you do what you can. But I wanted to come. But it's always about brainstorming and being creative. It's kind of, the times are like that. But now with the social media, we can do so much more to raise the visibility of who we are and what we are doing. But it will always help to think in terms of partnerships. Find partners between your colleagues, other filmmakers, or some other partnerships, because first it helps to spread the news, second it helps to get the funding. The sponsors, here comes, I wanted just to comment, yes, but you don't go to the bank if you think that if you're too free with this, go to the wine, because they will be happy to have some wilderness there. Some brands that would be happy to engage because not only the logo but the statement of the company goes into this direction. Yeah, it's not that easy, but it's not impossible. I absolutely believe that, because the business started using the creativity a long time ago, and actually in the Anglo-Saxon country, it's much more developed. So many brands invested in documentary films 10 years ago, even when. So don't be afraid to talk to the business, kind of never be afraid. And of course, if they think that your audience is small, that's why I was telling, think about bigger audience when you combine with other artists and create a bigger event of this. It will be supporting all of you. But it will be always about creativity, just that the times has come to the creativity in terms of how we expose ourselves. The festival is the brand. It gives the stamp. It helps for the future financing. Absolutely. Every selection at festival helps. That's why it takes also the knowledge for you to know which festivals require premiere, like Rotterdam or Berlinale. So never show your film before that. I mean, you can show it to friends, whatever, but never announce it as official premiere. You have to have this knowledge. After that, you can do whatever you want once your work has an international premiere. I wanted also to mention the co-productions. Basically, if you have more ambitious project, European system is pretty open about that, to try and kind of to look for co-production in Poland or in Germany or in France, places that traditionally have good funds. So, of course, it means that you have to know people, like everywhere, networking. So, visiting festivals and co-production markets always helps in this direction. First, because you meet people on your frequency and you talk about your future projects, and you never know where you can meet in the future. Maybe not now, maybe not with this project, but tomorrow you might something in common. Or let's say you need funding in Poland, so you can always talk to somebody, producer, filmmaker, experimenter, say what is there, how you do it, so kind of what are the possibilities. So if you have more ambitious project, which is kind of more expensive, think out of the box, think out of your country, because European system serves really, and it's very happy to encourage co-productions. In this sense, there are so many foundations which are not only local-based, not nationally based, but European-based. I'm talking mostly about European experiences, because American system and British system is pretty different.
Yes. But I think, sorry, it also depends on, what the themes of your film are. For example, we all know that at the moment Poland has a lot of money. So you might make a film that, for example, has somebody Polish that's in the crew, right? Or you might have a film that is based in Spain but has a Polish actor. So you might, this is a slightly more strategic way of thinking about it, that, if you get part of your crew to be Polish, then you are able to apply for Polish money. And there is a lot of it right now. So think about it. But it's really interesting, because that's this sort of more strategic way of thinking about your film before you even start making it, which as artists we don't necessarily often think. I'm still learning that, frankly. But I think that's an interest. The co-productions are really important, and also I think what's interesting, which we're witnessing in the UK right now, as we, exited the European Union, the landscape of funding has also changed. So I'm actually, in some ways, artists like myself who have European passports are in a better position than, a lot of British people, British artists, before, now. So we basically, we have access to money that they don't have. But what it also means is that the national funding is shrinking in some ways, because more British artists then apply for that funding, because that is the only option. So you really do have to think creatively, yeah.
And what Camilla said is very important. Basically, co-productions always go about using creative elements from the other country. Of course, I mean, not a single country will be just giving, I'm talking about national funding systems. They will always give some money if you spend part of them, or the creative elements, let's say now that we mentioned Poland, kind of cinematographer or actors or post-production or shooting there. Something small, but you have to have elements. That's why it's basically the strategy, how to finance your work beforehand. You don't do it in the middle. Some kind of, you think about these strategies, but there are money there, so you have to be open to this in this direction. Talking about that, I wanted to mention, I don't know how many of you are aware that there is Eurimash is a European institution which is supporting gap financing for films. But since several years, they're supporting experimental films, which has to be kind of proper feature-length films, like 1 hour and a half, that have to be made for being exposed in cinema theaters. But this system works like that. 4 festivals with industry forums every year are selected to host this award. For this year, I think it's Thessaloniki Film Festival, Les Arcs, Karlovy Vary, but you always can check it on Eurimash website. So you apply, if you get selected for this works in progress, it's works in progress we are talking about. I'm talking about €50,000, which is the award for this experimental film. So it's good to know, because it's one of the good money that you can get for experimental films. And of course, be alert, check everything. Actually, what is everything? At every festival, when you see the partners, you can get a lot of idea and information who is involved in experimental film, for example, and not always, not only, sorry. Like, again, most, the developed countries in Europe have different funding bodies and many levels. Yes, if you don't know all the details about Germany, find somebody from Germany, like producer or filmmaker, and talk about. I think the best funding model in film, in audiovisual sphere, not industry, is networking. You talk to the people. You talk to the people. Today, you, as I said, today you might not work with them, but tomorrow you might work with, because you already know each other, you know the directions of the works you are developing.
Can I just say on the back of that, with Santec, I think there's few filmmakers in the audience that are far more advanced than I am, for example, so I'll be interested to hear your experiences. But I think I have just one word that I think has been guiding me for a long time, and it doesn't often jive with everybody in the film world, but that is generosity. I think be open to other filmmakers, be open to share your experiences, because actually your friend's success is also your success, right? Because this is part of building networks, and there might be a fund you know about that your friend doesn't know about. If you bought a plan, you don't get it, and your friend gets it, well, that's tough, that's just the world. And it's a competitive, the audiovisual world is a competitive world. But I think, if you can be part of that success because you've contributed something, I think that goes a long way. And for me, that's a very important rule. I'm not cagey. I don't sit on information that's only I know and only I'm going to make a use of. But, it's old school.
I very agree with you say. But sometimes, let me add, if you are going to the essence, sometimes we are talking about this community, at least I know this in Barcelona or in Spain, for example. For example, the problem is that there is not a production plan before to start. So sometimes there is a small team production behind the project, and maybe they have money to do the project, to shoot the film and develop and so on. But afterwards, it's a hard work to do it. But there is no more money to get the visibility, because the application submission form, if you want to go maybe Ann Arbor, is $30. If you want to go Rotterdam, is 60. Berlinale is 50. Venice Film Festival is 60. I'm talking short films.
Yes.
So if you don't have maybe 100 euros, 1,000 for this application stuff afterwards to get the visibility, it doesn't exist. So I know your mind is more co-production and maybe the experimental cinema, because there is another topic, maybe the system fit or catalog if you are an artist, for example, or a filmmaker doing experimental cinema. It happened with Jonas Mikas, for example, and Paul Sharits. The system select the art gallery scene, say Paul Sharits an artist, filmmaker is Jonas Mikas. So one is surviving, another is another place. The same right now with Christian Markley doing his films, or Rosa Barba, Tafitadin, and so on, because they are galleries. And in the other way, if you are doing your experimental cinema, in the bottom, we're talking about the experimental cinema without no co-production, it's so hard, it's very difficult.
It is definitely hard, but it's that's why we are thinking, and it's really open discussion, and please, if you have questions and if you want to comment, you're very open to do so. Of course, it's difficult to make experimental cinema, and again, we will talk because the audience is limited and because the sponsors comes with the audience and all this, and you're absolutely right. If you have to give like 30, 40, 50 euro for applications at different festivals, you need at least 1,000 or 2,000. But let's follow the model of the big Hollywood productions. They always make a film with the money for marketing and advertising into the budget. So it's a culture, you have to start thinking like that. Oh, absolutely. Always think about the marketing money which are part of your budget. And in the moment you start raising the money, you always have to have financing plan and to know how much approximately we'll do for the plan A and for the plan B. And then look for this money, even when applying for funds. I think funds will even have to come to this idea that this money are absolute must, because yes, absolutely, if you don't have money to apply to different festivals, you don't go there.
There are exceptions. For example, like I have colleagues in Latin America, if they want to apply in different festivals, they receive the waiver code. So they know they don't have money or to do these applications, and it's different.
Yes, but you always kind of have to rely on the opposite side if you receive a waiver code or no. Of course, you can always ask for waiving code, and I kind of in a way hate short film festivals and which want money for application, because we know to make a short film it's bloody. I mean, all the efforts of the filmmakers are there, and then they have to give like $30, euro, whatever for application. That's a lot. That's a lot. But
Myra, you're making some interesting points. There were a couple of things I wanted to comment about. One, to go back just a little bit, when you said you go to a festival and look at who supports that event. When I go to festivals, the first thing I do is go to the back page of the program. Who's supporting you? And I look very, very closely at that. When I go to art exhibits, I look at the back page of the exhibition catalog. Same thing. In terms of application fees, I'm seeing, at least in the United States, more and more of a trend of supporting artists with screening fees. And we do that, and this is only our third year now giving artists screening fees. So they get the money back, or those people who are adjudicated into the program. So there's at least that gesture to try to support the artists a little bit.
oh, it's great.
Yeah, and it's not just us. There's other people or other organizations that are doing that too. I wanted to, and in terms of who's supporting this festival, for example, and seeing what cultural organizations, what was I going to say about that? I never learned, I'm pretty good at grant writing these days. And I know how I became good at grant writing. I never took a course, I never took a workshop, but I found myself in certain opportunities where I was able to be on an adjudication committee. So I've been on an adjudication committee for the National Endowment for the Arts on several occasions. At my university, I've been on an adjudication committee for faculty grants and everything in between. There's no better way to learn how to write a grant than to see how other people are writing. And I discovered at my university that most of my colleagues can't write worth shit. So, and that, I mean, that's a silly aside, but seeing how other people are applying, seeing how they're forming their words. When you apply for a grant, pay attention to what those questions are. Pay attention to the word count. Pay attention to the specificity of what they're asking for. And there's no better way to learn how to do that than to find your way, you know, say to even a local granting organization, local cultural organization, and see if you can get yourself on such a committee and see what your colleagues are doing and see how your colleagues are thinking about and writing about their own works.
Absolutely.
So if there is only one to apply something, or okay, we can open to get impressions for the audience, maybe to can enrich the discussion, the argue here. There's some who wants. It's coming.
Okay. I'd like to ask for some specific examples from your side, because just for me it's useful to know specific cases. About the crowdfunding, for instance, I'd like to know if any of you had gone through a crowdfunding process and which were the challenges of it. I mean, because from my point of view, to do a crowdfunding, as I was chatting with Camila yesterday, you need like a previous community to do that, of a community of interest. So if that doesn't exist for your film, which are the strategies you can do to find that community. And also, what effort is for you to plan a crowdfunding and do that, let's say. I mean, the energy that you have for your film is limited, so when you start doing other activities that have to do more with producing, how do you deal with your time, effort, and energy? And also about what you were saying about being more creative in doing events, or it's kind of the same for me, that how many time and energy do you need for doing that? And also if you have some specific case that you have personally done, and how was that? Thank you.
I can start on crowdfunding as I'm in the process of creating my first crowdfunding campaign. Indeed, a lot of work, and I have a lot of friends with very successful crowdsourcing campaigns, and I'm also very lucky that I have a lot of very generous friends. I think our American filmmaker friend Cecilia Condit says, I'm smart, but I've got really smart friends. So I think that helps. But it is, I think, as we talked yesterday, I think the way to approach crowdfunding is to first of all think about themes of your film. In your case, it's very clear one of your appeals is to communities of, performers, to thespians, to theaters, right, which exist across the world. And I think in your case, what I would do personally, I would probably do a series of 2. I've been recently advised that actually it's better to do 2-stage crowdfunding campaign than 3. So maybe slightly smaller steps, but get some funding at first for maybe editing, like you said, that was the key thing that was holding you back. And then after that, you do another one. Once you've already built a little bit of an audience, you do another one for color correction and everything else you need the money for. And I think Indiegogo is a platform where, unlike Kickstarter, that if you, let's say, if you make a plea to make, let's say, £5,000, but you only get 3, you get to keep all the money, whereas with Kickstarter, you don't. So I think that's important to think about. And I think as far as the energy, I completely sympathize with you, that as a maker, as an artist, I really didn't want to be wearing a producer's hat. That was something I was resistant to for a long time, which is why I spent 6 months chasing my tail trying to find a producer, and then I realized actually I am my own producer and I can do it. But I think, there's 2 ways of thinking about it. At first I was really rather grumpy about, having to do all that, but actually it did infuse my project with a new energy once I started going and thinking about all those different ways of, how to attract the audiences, who it is that I'm really targeting. And it can bring a bit of a fresh breath of fresh air to the project. And that's how I also think about funding applications. We talked about Sundance yesterday. That there's this laborious process of writing those grants, but actually, personally, I learn a lot from them because there's a point in your project where you need to be able to talk about what it is, what your project is, what it is that you're looking for, and have some kind of a strategy on how you're going to get it. And once you go through that route, and that first feature film, as we also shared and done too, it's probably the most difficult journey. But trust me, once you've done it, you can do the next one. You'll be able to do the next one. But that's my 2 pennies on crowdfunding.
Yeah. I just wanted to build on Camila's, or comment on Camila's comment, that whatever the form of funding that you're applying for, crowdfunding, a granting organization, whatever. My perspective, it doesn't matter whether you get the money or not. The process of applying for funds forces you to think about what your project is really about. And that, for me, has been just priceless, an absolutely priceless activity. So consider that. And remember, too, that what we're involved with is a cultural activity, a creative cultural activity. And don't let money get in the way of that project, of being creative. I know this is about how do we make money, and I'm sort of saying how don't we make money, but at the core, it's about the cultural sharing.
Coming specifically to your questions. First, the community. That's why are these platforms which are already established, like Indiegogo and Kickstarter, they had their community. So in this case, we're not talking about your community on our community, close communities. Although for crowdfunding, if you go deeper, you will get it that it's always nice to have a launching event where you can invite much more people, like journalists, cultural organizers, people from different art areas, potential sponsors, kind of people that can come with money. But community, yeah, absolutely. Don't think that you're approaching only your community. That's exactly the difference. But how you prepare the materials for the crowdfunding project, this is when I said seduce the potential audience which will pass through this website.
Well, also, you know, there's different ways of doing it. Sorry, talking about the themes of your project, you know, I mentioned the theater being, you know, a big part of your project, but your film is also about relationships. Come on, that appeals to a lot of people. You know, there's everybody. I think a lot of people will be interested in that. So he's thinking very, very broadly about what really is at the core of your film. And I think you have countless options of how you could pitch your film, in particular, you know, thinking about your project. So I think it's really not, it's also thinking about maybe experiment that I often do is I sometimes, you know, show people a piece of work and I don't tell them what my aims for creating that work was, and I just get them to tell me what it is about for them. Because you always want audiences to project their own experience into what it is that you're making. So that's an interesting exercise. We'll give you some, you know, some ideas.
We have a question here.
Sorry.
Can I just finish with the answer? Because, one second. The teams are very important because basically how you expose your work outside to the community, whatever. Define the themes. What is it about? What you're looking, because this is how the people will associate with this. Is it love? Is it human rights? Is it freedom? Is it adventure? But make it more specific, because this is how the people go. Most of the people don't care about the film if it's kind of made, but whoever. They want to see something which will connect to their emotions. So do it for them, kind of summarize it, reduce it to something, and then they can project themselves on this. So the teams are very important. They tell you, who are you looking for? These people over there, or these potential sponsors or potential partners. Partners are some people, organizations which can come with the resources that they have, not necessarily money, but they will help you, because even as a channel of information, you outreach much more people. And then about the capacity, of course it takes energy and resources. And my advice is look for volunteers, like people which are studying producing, or other filmmakers, or cultural management, or something like that. They will be happy, if they're beginners, they will be happy to be involved in a project, because yes, it takes time. It takes time for crowdfunding, for example. Every day somebody has to follow the platform, if there are messages, to answer them. It's an involvement, it's a dedication, but it's a learning process. So it will be interesting for many people which are studying kind of humanity subjects. And for the example, for events, let's say, you can combine it with fashion, with human rights, with educational activities. So you can have some other partners which will invest time, energy, or money, and then you will invite much more people. Let's say, it depends on the theme of the work, of course. That's why I'm just throwing some subjects like fashion. If it goes slightly into this direction, lifestyle, fashion, then you can attract somebody who is behind fashion brands, or, I don't know, top coiffures even. You can make a party or gathering to expose it with some funny hair, something like that. It doesn't need to correspond 100% to your film. Look at the direction, because if it really goes with something that we can call lifestyle, this is exactly how you be creative, because nobody will fit entirely our project. We have to think in what direction we can go to find the partners and to create something bigger. So let's say screening of the film, followed by a party on a particular music theme or dress code theme. Something will be much more appealing to wider audience, which will attract them, and in between, they will get to know your work. That's the direction.
I just wanted to add that what Brian was saying about applying funds, you have also a deadline. That's important. Not only that you have to write your project. We have a question here.
It's more of a comment. I just want to say a comment. I want to play a little bit of the devil's advocate because it's fun. And when it comes to crowdfunding, it can be a great thing. And I want to start by saying that perhaps the best way to learn about crowdfunding is that you go into a this is how I learned. You go into a crowdfunding platform and you find 10 projects and you give $1 to each one of them, and then you follow what it is that they're doing. And then you learn, and then you can see which ones are successful and why. So that's how I learned about crowdfunding. But there's another thing that perhaps is not said about crowdfunding, which is, it complicates things, which is the first amount of crowdfunding has to come from people that you know, which is your friends and family. So you can basically only do it once in your life, or if not, you become like this annoying friend who's asking their friends over and over. No, so it works, but it works once, or you become this annoying friend. No, okay. And then in terms of grants, which is also a beautiful thing, but I think with grants it comes to a point where I got to a point where anytime I would apply for a grant, I feel that I have to cut the finger of one of my films, because there's certain things that in the process of making a film perhaps don't need to be defined. No? It's like, at least for me, like you need to navigate certain things undefined, and when you apply for a grant, all of a sudden you have to define it, and it kind of kills the film.
But you only have to define it at the moment of writing the grant, right?
Right. But the thing is that you have to write many grants because you have many different types of funds. You can't just write one grant and send it everywhere. It's like you have to be specific, and I think that in that sense, there is a loss. There's a great loss. And to me, it became such a loss to the point where I said, I'm never writing a grant ever again. No? I mean, at least for now.
But then I watched your beautiful film last night, and you actually are very well funded. So you have,
right?
It seems
but
like
not
you have...
grants, but not through grants.
Right, so through different labs and projects,
right,
but still projects that are competition-based and require you to apply, right?
Well, not that film, not yesterday's film.
Yeah, but your other work, right, which is great, it's fantastic. But, you obviously, you know that process very well. And I completely agree with you. I think there is definitely a sense of, and I talked about it a little bit yesterday, that whole grant writing, it's a very strange beast, right?
Right.
But you also know after a while that, and institutions recognize that things change in the process of the making of the film. That's what I mean. You're making a statement at the time of writing the grant, and in some ways you take the money and run.
Right.
Right. And as long as you produce the project.
But I want to say one last thing, and this is a strategy that I use for getting money, and I would like to share it with you, and it works beautifully. And it's
selling body parts.
You can do that.
I've done it. You can't see, but
there's a way that there's a filmmaker, and this is I stole this idea from him, and he's Jodorowsky. He's a Chilean filmmaker. And he made many films when he was young, and then he stopped, and then now, as an old man, he's making films again. And he has a method in which every time he looks for funding, he does this. And he stole that from somebody else, and I stole it from him, and now I want to share it with you. And what he does is he goes to a rich friend, no? I mean, we all have maybe one rich friend, but he has a couple of rich friends, and he goes to them and he asks for, when he wants to begin a film, he asks for $100,000, no? So the rich friend will say, okay, well, I have that money, but I mean, it's a lot of money. I can't just give it to you. And Jodorowsky tells him, don't worry, I will give it back to you in a week. So the friend trusts Jodorowsky. He deposits the money. I mean, it doesn't have to be $100,000. You can find a rich friend to give you $1,000, no? So the friend deposits the money to Jodorowsky. Jodorowsky goes to the bank, and he takes the money out. You know? And he takes the money out, and he fills his pockets with all the money. You know, his jacket, his pants. You know? And the day that he fills himself with this money, he goes to a production company in Paris and says, okay, I want to make a film, but I don't want $100,000, I want $1 million, no? But he asks for this money, knowing that at that time he's rich, and that he can run away with that money, no? And there's something fundamental and very interesting to me in this, because when you are to ask money, it's very different if you need money or if you want money. And in this case, what Jodorowsky is doing with all this money is that he is wanting money. He's not going there and saying, please give me money, I'm a poor, suffering artist and I need money. It's very likely that you won't get money that way. But if I do that when I go get money. I go to the bank, I take all the money that I have, I put it in my pockets, and it always works. Because when I arrive there, I want the money, I don't need it. So hopefully that can help some of you. Thank you.
I love it.
Tim Dierdima, he has 2 films here, Dark Knight Voyage and Vertical Sound, next Sunday. Just Alberto.
I wanted to address your comment about grant writing, applying for grants. It is a wild and woolly world. And I remember when I first started applying for grants, I can't remember, somebody said, be careful because you don't want the grant to determine your project. Make your project determine the grant. Now, the specific example I have here is that at our festival, we have we've developed a regional youth program that we show every year. So during the year, we do this outreach. We go to schools around New Mexico, and we present the kids, junior high school kids, elementary school kids, high school kids, with some examples of the films that we show, and we invite them, and there's no charge for that program, to participate. It's a wonderful program, an audience, a theater like this, packed with kids and family, and popcorn is thrown around, and soda pops, and it's a wonderful thing. Well, we didn't start the youth program until about 5 years into our festival. And the reason we started it was because I saw a grant that I thought was interesting, but it had an educational component. And this is where it's important to read the specifics of that grant. What are they looking for? Who have they supported in the past? Kind of a version of me looking at the back page of a festival program. And in that case, the grant actually did determine a particular turn in our festival. And it turned out to be a wonderful opportunity for us. But do be careful. Do be careful because you have a vision of what your project ought to be, and the grant could take you in a left turn or let's call it a right turn, that you don't want to
Can I just
go with.
add something to that?
Please.
I think there's a different way of thinking about money in film as well. What is the money? How is the money being used, right? So, for example, I made a film recently which is based in Abkhazia, which is a de facto state between Georgia and Russian Federation, theoretically still considered a war zone. For me, the most important part about this project was actually about bringing money to the community. I could have made this film with no money. I could have asked all my 7 performers to perform whatever they needed to perform, and I could have totally gotten away with it and made the film probably for £2,000. My actors, I'm proud to say, got paid London wages, which has made a huge difference to their lives. It had made a difference to their community. So for me, that's why that funding was important, because it was about bringing money to the community that's already so significantly disadvantaged. That it's, and hopefully the film will, also bring some of that recognition to at least some of the performers, those professional ones that count, that it counts for them. But I think, there's a way to think about how you're spending money. The same thing with, I was part of this BFI Film Fund talk recently, and we talked about how does, the money for a lot of funding in the UK comes from what's called lottery funding. So people buy those lottery tickets. And, in some ways I always think of those people, I'm thinking, oh God, this is so sad, because you're spending all this money, you're probably never going to win this money. So there's a way of honoring the money that comes from the people, that comes from the places that give you the money, and spend it in a way that you're not spending it on first-class flight to Abkhazia, not that one like such exists, but you're paying the actors more, or you kind of, because either way you have to spend the money, right? Because you have to write a grant report, and you have to prove that you spend the money. So it's about distributing it in ways that I think is fair, and I think creates in some ways, I mean that sounds a bit cliched, but that creates at least a better world temporarily for as long as the production is going on. I don't know.
Coming back to the grants, I hate doing applications. I hate it. I think there is not a single day in my life that I didn't do any application or report or I don't know what. But this is the system. And this is how the administration works with public money. So if you want to use it, we have to respect the regulations. But what I want to say here, as an artist, you can be very kind of focused into the abstract of your work, what you want to do, and look at the application for the grant like something. They always have objectives. Here is what Brian is saying. Be very careful always what is written. What do they give money for? Is it for developing the society, for education? It's always very important. So kind of here comes the creativity also. Think how you can fit your project. Here is this kind of suffering for 1 hour to define where your project goes. But I don't look at it like cutting your finger. It just really kind of takes a time of your life which you can spend maybe in more creative ways. But considering that you can get money which will give you the creative freedom, I think it's worthy enough to do for the efforts. But then if you're very careful how you read it, and in the next stage you're creative of how your work fits this, if it fits, don't do it in any price, absolutely. Don't let it define your project, never. Just think, can you be creative in this or not? Then, for the artist, use as many visuals as possible and references, even music, use whatever. But for every cultural committee, commissions, and it helps a lot. Words cannot define a project. And I'm very surprised, for example, because I'm doing co-production market for many, many years, and yeah, we are talking mostly art house films there. But visuals are something which are missing. I don't know why kind of the people think that only wording, no, you're a visual artist in most of the cases. Use all the visuals you can come, absolutely. When I'm saying kind of music, put a link to music that inspires you, because when I look at the visuals with the music, when I'm in these commissions, but I'm sure that it works for everybody in these funding bodies when they have committees, help them direct and kind of create this ambience that they can evaluate better. Basically, don't be shy to use visuals and references. And translation, make sure you have excellent translations, because just imagine, of course, if you're applying here in Spain and it's in Spanish, it's okay. But if you apply somewhere in English, make sure you use a very good translator, because otherwise you're killing your project. If somebody reads and cannot get everything, it's a bit like, so be limited in words, max in visuals and references, because you're artists. Always send your previous work or something like that that can show the direction you're working in. So all this helps. Yeah, but grants, I don't know, take a cup of strong cognac, vodka, whatever, open the creative channels. Yeah, it's not easy. It's not, I'm suffering and suffocating with grants also.
Okay, great.
Again, I think Myra's point is very, very good. And speaking from somebody who has been on an adjudication, many adjudication committees, visuals are so, so helpful. But only if they ask for them. Only give them what they're asking for. If there's no space for visuals, don't try to assume that you can sneak through. And a small example of that is in my festival, which is all about cinematic experimentation. We're not interested, not that there's anything wrong with it, but we're not interested in feature-length narrative films. We're not interested in feature-length documentary films. That's not the focus of our festival. And every year, I get probably, 30 or 40 straight-ahead narrative films, straight-ahead documentary films. And I'm thinking, why did they waste their time? Why did they waste the money? And my only thought is that they're thinking, well, I can sort of sneak it through. Maybe somebody won't notice. But...
Or they haven't read the...
What's that?
They haven't read the guidance.
Yes. In terms of writing and the text that Myra was referring to, not only are many of us visual artists, but I would say in a more expansive way, we're all poets. And we think about the world in poetic ways. Grant writing is totally fucking counterintuitive to that sensibility. It's so specific, and there's no room for poetry in a grant application. And I think that speaks to your comment about how writing a grant could potentially kill, you didn't use this word, but the poetry of the project, I think might be something that you would agree with. Be careful of that, but maybe you need to divide yourself in two. I'm the poet, and now I'm the pragmatic grant writer, if you decide to move in those directions. But I've found that to be really, really complicated every time I apply for a grant. I hate applying for grants. It's that, and Nina knows this, the deadlines that Patricia was talking about and the specificity, but
Am I the
it's
only
made my
weird
festival...
person that likes writing grants?
What?
The only weird person that likes writing grants?
I know. But, it's gotten us through 17 years, and it's allowed us to have a lot of fun at our festival.
Thanks so much, Brian. We have time for one more question. It's from the audience, outside the audience, and the streaming. I am reading. Is now that you've mentioned it before, artist fee to access festivals seems to be an economic barrier, an easy way to get money from artist enthusiasm. Shouldn't we fight to eliminate them? This is one of the questions.
It's a really, really good point. And I would agree, 100%. I hate charging artists a submission fee, but it's one of the ways, well, what we do. We charge a $30 US submission fee. However, once you've participated in our festival, once you've been adjudicated into the festival, once we've screened your film at our festival, you are now an alumni of our event, and you never have to pay a submission fee again. International artists, that is, artists outside of the United States, never pay submission fees. That's how we operate. And so there's still some submission fees, and it certainly helps our organization. Everybody gets paid who works, all of the staff on my festival, they all get paid. I don't. I've never gotten a penny from...
Brian, you also pay the artists who are screening the films. You're actually paying the screening fees, which is very unusual.
And we do pay screening fees as well. So that's sort of the way that we navigate that. It does. But it's a tricky question, and it's an unfortunate sort of entity that continues of artists paying for.
Sometimes this is barrier, economic barrier.
It is
to not get a huge submissions.
But what I would advise you, if there's a festival that charges you more than $40 or $50 US, run away from it. Don't go near it. There's a festival in New York City that charges $300 US submission fee, and they talk about how they're going to help promote your film, blah, blah, blah. It's bullshit. And sadly, I've had a couple students over the years who have fallen into that trap and told me about it later. I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I wish you had told me earlier. So those kinds of extravagant submission fees always mean they're not going to do anything for you.
Can I also add on top of that, since we are on film festivals, that you know, Film Freeway, as many of you will know, has changed things a lot. So there's this, you know, huge sort of resurgence of film festivals, but also new festivals are being created. Sometimes they last, sometimes they don't. And actually, there's a number of festivals in Los Angeles, for example, that are pure money-making machines. And they'll ask you to pay. And you know, some of my students have fallen victim to that too. So I think my sort of two penny about that is also be quite selective about festivals. In some ways, don't submit to everything that you see out there. Because you know, it's so easy on Film Freeway just to press the button, and then bang, $20 is gone. You know, and you'll never hear from them. You won't even get an answer to say, sorry, your film didn't get in. So, you know, just watch out for those. I think that last thing I would say about that is that if there is an artist or a filmmaker you admire, whose career you follow, and I have a few of those in my pocket, go on their website and see where they've shown. And just, you know, look at where else you can submit. There's always festivals that my friends are submitting that somehow I didn't know about, or, you know. So I think that, and that's also a good way of looking at what festivals are really legitimate.
I will add very shortly that basically festival culture is absolute must, absolutely. Which are the relevant festivals? Which are the second relevant festivals? It's kind of because it gives kind of validation of the works, as you were talking about curation. But first, we cannot fight the fee. It is kind of private entrepreneurship. It is kind of you making films. There are some festivals which are able to exist only because of that, because when they receive like thousands of films, somebody has to watch them. These people are getting paid, and it's kind of, it's a big machine. But not always, as we have these festival phantoms. That's why the festival culture is essential if you're working in the audiovisual field. It's just be very careful to whom you are paying. As simple as that, because even public festivals in Europe, like in Berlinale and Cannes, which are both the big ones, they also require submission fee. So it's not about that. It's really about to have to consider these submission fees in your budgets, to fight for them with the funding bodies, or kind of, and to be careful where you're spending your money. But it's not for us to regulate the system of festivals. It's impossible, unfortunately, or fortunately.
Thanks so much, Mira. There is a pity there is not times to do more questions, but if you want to talk with them, we can do it outside the room. So thanks so much, Mira, Camila, and Brian, for sharing these impressions.
Gracias, Antoni, a ti también.
Just for me, and I imagine for the other folks on the committee too, I've got some calling cards and such. I would be happy to speak with anybody post-festival. Yes, post-festival. Not necessarily while I'm here, but I can share my email address, and sharing projects, sharing ideas about fundraising and such. I'm always interested. It's about sharing. I'm always interested in sharing ideas. So I hope to hear from some of you.
Los festivales son lugares de encuentro, entre otras cosas. En el 2014 le mandé un corto a Brian, lo programó. Después le pedí programación para ponerla en el festival. Te mandé otro corto, me invitaste, hicimos una programación de la alternativa. Conocí a Camila, que estaba allí haciendo una residencia. Antoni lo conocí a través de la pantalla el año pasado presentando su monográfico. Este año me ha presentado un proyecto a Cinema Pendent. ha sido seleccionado, entonces por eso también está aquí. Y Mira venía a unas jornadas de AVE el fin de semana pasado, simplemente le pregunté, oye, ¿te quieres quedar? Y me dijo que sí. Y así es como se van haciendo las cosas. Tenemos media hora, hasta, o algo, bueno, un poquito menos, hasta las 12, que empieza la siguiente jornada. Si vais o sea, la siguiente es en castellano y en catalán. Si no necesitáis más aparatos de traducción simultánea, los dejáis ahí, recogéis vuestro DNI. Si lo vais a seguir utilizando, guardaros el pinganillo y así reciclamos. De vuelta, muchas gracias a Acción Cultural Española y al SDE del ICEC, el Departamento de Cultura, y a vosotros por estar aquí con vuestro interés. Y a los técnicos del CDCB. Merci.